Morning everyone, it's Alan at P&I Training, and in this episode we are going to look at the breeding grounds for gangs of Newcastle and in and around the northeast. Also in this video I'm going to start putting a list up of all of what we would call the classic gangs of Newcastle from the 70s and 80s. So stick around, see if your gang's on there, make sure I've spelt it properly, and if your gang's not on there, let us know. In the early 1970s, violence erupted around England, on the streets, on the estates, and at football matches. The era of street gangs and football hooligans had arrived. But where did these gangs come from, and why did they start popping up? When I was born in 1970, I didn't realise what kind of era I'd been brought into. Places like New Biggin Hall and Cruddas Park had already been redeveloped, and places like Baker and Scotchwood were in the process of being bulldozed to be redeveloped. I'd been born into the Dan Smith modernisation era. Dan Smith was leader of Newcastle Council from 1960 until 1965, and later as the head of the Northern Economic Planning Council. To quote Dan Smith talking about the people of Newcastle, "In a huge city, it's a fairly common observation that the dwellers in a slum are almost a separate race of people with different values, aspirations and ways of being." Dan Smith had decided that we were kind of subnormal people. We couldn't look after ourselves, so he was going to show us how to do it. So him, the local council and his planning committees decided that the best way to make your life better for you was to destroy your houses, move you out your family homes and areas, destroy your shops, pubs, and move you all away from your friends. And some of you were about to be put into these cities in the sky. And by the way, Dan Smith was later convicted on corruption charges for taking backhanders for contracts to push things through with the committees and the building companies that he had interests in. So he might not have had the people's best interests at heart all along. Dan Smith's councils had put things in place to start the mass demolition of Newcastle and the surrounding areas. It started in the early 60s and went right on through until the end of the 70s, all to push Dan Smith's vision of building the Brasilia of the North. But that's not quite how it panned out. In the 70s, during this period of demolition and reconstruction, something else happened. The economy took a downturn. The usual kinds of work like shipbuilding and coal mining took a massive hit, and later on they were privatised. There was increased competition from abroad, and this led to job cuts and uncertainty. This in turn led to poverty. During this period of economic downturn and displacement of families, the families didn't want to go. They were happy where they were happy in their communities, they were happy nipping to the local shops and seeing their friends, they were happy with the pubs they were drinking in. And it was the same for the kids. The kids had no jobs, no futures, and nothing to do but hang around. So the government had created these perfect breeding grounds. And breed is what the gangs were going to do. Kids from the estate started to form gangs. They would group together because they had things in common, such as clothes or music, and they gave their gangs names from the areas where they were from. And they were fiercely loyal towards these areas, and they would do anything to protect them from other gangs, including violence. And the gangs from the 70s were about to become a lot more violent than their predecessors from the 1960s. But as you can see from the list that I popped up on the screen there, the gangs came from everywhere. And I know some of them were a bit later than the early 70s, but I'm going to start looking at them next week. And next week, I'm going to concentrate on one gang in particular who made it big on the wide screen in 1971. The Scots where I grew up, boys. Thanks for checking in, and I'll see you next time.